Hello, listeners to Continuing Conversations and watchers. You will see that today's episode covers a sensitive subject or something that could be triggering to some. It's about mental health in gaming. And so we always want to treat these subjects with the right level of dignity and respect. We will be providing, before and after the show, some information people could contact in order to get more information about mental health. Mental health first aid is offered by a number of organizations, and there's a link to mentalhealthfirstaid.org, wherein someone can take a course, find a course about how to deal with mental health issues that might arise in daily life with ourselves or with friends. Also, the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 988, and that can be called or texted. In addition, today's guest that we're going to have on is involved with D8 Summit Charities. It's a 501(c)(3) charity organization headquartered in Illinois that attends events across the country. They seek to support local causes while also providing educational outreach to the gamer community. They seek to give voice to new and underrepresented people in the gamer community. And you can find them at D8 summit.org and learn more about their charity events. Again, we want you all to have a great time playing, but we want to also understand that sometimes we have life happen and we want to take care of our mental health. All right, enjoy the show. Welcome to another Continuing Conversations. I have to say, we've been wanting to do this episode for years. It has come up so many times, especially during and after the pandemic. And so me and Jim are so happy to have you all tuning into this week's Continuing Conversations. Of course, first, introductions. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am a lead writer for Captain's Log, solo RPG, in addition to being a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, a blogger on Continuing Mission, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG, and so happy to be a co-host here with the fantastic Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. I'm super honored and excited to also be the co-host on this podcast with Michael. Lo these many 107, 108 something episodes. I don't know where we are now, but we're cruising right along into the second half of the 100. I know we'll work our way toward 200, but it'll be a while before we get there. But we're working on it, so we're having fun, and we keep finding new and interesting topics to talk about. And I think we've got a really great, important episode tonight. But before we talk about the topic, we're going to introduce our guest, Connor. And as is tradition on our show, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also somewhere in there, fold in your favorite Star Trek series and your favorite Star Trek captain.
Or person. Or character.
Person, character. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Wow. So, hey, everybody. My name is Connor Self. My pronouns, he, him. I am a mental health therapist. I work in the public schools with youth and their families, addressing a number of mental health concerns, holistic and community-based health concerns, and help families find access to mental health services, as well as, protecting and nurturing our community. I serve in the leadership of our state counseling association in that capacity, and am involved in a number of community initiatives. But I'm really excited about a lot of the other stuff I do, because I've been a gamer since a young kid, and a Trekker since an incredibly young age as well. I grew up watching the original Star Trek. It was my first Star Trek. My parents let me watch it. They said, "Oh, this is terrible television," but it gets them interested in science, and that's good. Now that I'm older, Yeah, they're absolutely correct. Yeah, it was terrible television. I love it. It is still my favorite Trek. Because it really encapsulates and captures a lot of the idealism, the sense of exploration, encountering the unknown, and engaging it with all of our humanity. I am in gaming spaces. I am a gaming creative with dozens of publications for various games, largely for Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a convention coordinator. I'm a professional dungeon master on Start Playing, and just a big nerd. I'm just a big nerd. Here. Let's talk about nerdery.
Welcome to the club. And your favorite character? We know now TOS is your favorite show. Favorite character?
Okay, so my favorite show is TOS, but I'm really, really interested in where they are taking the character of Pike. I think he's an interesting exploration into what does it mean to live to your ideals, even knowing that they might end in disaster. A lot of us, we have our beliefs and we try to live to them, but we're never quite certain how it's going to turn out. And for him, he's got a pretty solid understanding of where it's going to get him. So I'm curious to see how closely he lives to those Starfleet ideals and those personal ideals as the show continues.
Yeah. One question: how do you feel that you said you're a therapist in the schools? How do you think Trek influenced that decision, that career decision, or if it did at all?
In the original series, my favorite character was Bones, and I think he got me started because, I'm sure your listeners know that Bones is a psychiatrist, right? They from the very beginning, they had a vision that if you're going to have an extended voyage, years and years and years away from anything that away from home, that you would need to make comprehensive mental health a part of that for the crew to function and continue. And so there were always considerations from the very beginning. I think you see it a lot more explicitly conveyed in the newer Trek. Discovery and Strange New Worlds have several episodes themed specifically on mental health. And I'm always curious how they're going to portray it, how they're going to handle it. Are they going to do it sensitively? Are they not? Are the stories going to resonate with people? Are they going to be poignant and meaningful?
Mm-hmm. So, Jim, that launches us into the theme of this. Why don't you go ahead and take it? Talk about the theme, why we invited Connor on the show. And
obviously, I think with the credentials that Connor brings to the table here, clearly we've been wanting to do a mental health and gaming episode for a long time, and I know we've touched on it a little bit here and there in a few episodes, and it's kind of come up, just percolated up in different conversations we've had with different people about how important gaming is to a person's mental health all throughout life. Like it's escapism for some people. It's just a good way to get some healthy fantasy going on. There's just so many potential health benefits to gaming with a group of people, whether it's online or face to face, certainly. And I obviously that's why we wanted to bring you on board to talk about this. And Michael, I know we've got a list of questions that we can go through, but I thought maybe we talk about some personal anecdotes about gaming and mental health, and then just kind of see where it goes. And Connor, certainly feel free to jump in as appropriate. Clearly, safe space. I'm pretty vulnerable and open to wearing my heart on my sleeve. And Michael, I know you do much the same. Connor, you go as far or as not as far as you want to go. It's entirely up to you. I want our fans and our listeners to know that we are. We're all here with you. We're all gamers. We all love what we're doing. We all love Star Trek, And I think we've pretty well done a good job over the last 100 odd episodes to show that we're pretty open to everybody. We want everybody on the show at some point, fan or professional, whatever. We love you all. So I think that there's so many personal anecdotes I can talk about. Let's talk about the pandemic specifically. I think even before the pandemic, like 2016, 2017 was a pretty big blow to my mental health, partly because I'm in America and the election didn't go the way I hoped it would go, and a lot of the other people hoped it would go, and that turned into several years of really deep suckitude for me. Just partly because my partner works in the federal government. There's a lot of challenges there. There's just a lot of turmoil and change, and then right in the middle of that, we got this pandemic. And Connor, you were talking about how Bones being on the ship, a psychiatrist being on the ship because the ship is far from home, far from things you're off in the great unknown. That kind of felt like the pandemic a little bit, right? Especially the first few months, we were shut down, we were isolated. I was home alone with my family. I couldn't go see my friends. I couldn't go do the things I like to do, because we were all really trying to be smart and be safe. And it was, for me as an introvert, it was really, really super hard because prior to that point, my partner went to work, 4 days, 4 days a week, and I was working from home. I worked from home, and my son would be at school or daycare. And so like 90% of the week, the house was dead silent, and it was beautiful, right? Because I've got two cats. Cats are very quiet, and it was just a very calm place to be, right? And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. My partner's home, my son's home. The noise level went through the roof day in and day out. And, not that they were doing anything bad or anything negative. It's just like all of a sudden my quiet home became it was like the weekend every day, right? It was constant stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh, I have nowhere to go. I have no escape. There's nowhere to get away and find some me time. And fortunately, I was working on Star Trek Adventures at the time. I had just been promoted to project manager. So I went from writer to editor into project management. And I discovered, I think somewhere in that time, I don't know if it was right during the pandemic or sometime a little bit after, I picked up with Michael and we started doing an informal podcast with Studio Tembo. And then that kind of morphed into this show. But even before then, I discovered that I was really reaching out to the fans online just to connect with them and say, what are you doing with the game? They're doing Twitches, they're doing YouTubes, they're sharing their games online. And I was really feeding off of that. It reminded me of how important a game is and how much I miss playing my game with my friends. Because every week I'd go to my friend's house and we'd play board games or card games or RPGs or something. And all of a sudden that went away. And I was like, oh, I don't have any, even though I'm an introvert, I have absolutely no connection with the outside world. And I really missed it. Right. But gosh, it was so hard. And I think I really kind of, part of me mentally escaped into Star Trek Adventures, knowing that there was a huge online community of people talking about the game, playing the game, loving the game. And that really, truly buoyed me throughout the entire pandemic. I mean, it's still doing it now, right? I mean, we're still COVID hasn't gone away, even though it's, depending on where you are in the spectrum, it's either still there and very present, or it's not quite as present, but it's still there. And people are getting sick all the time with it. But I discovered mental health wise that having the game to work on, but also being able to connect with fans on a regular basis, really gave me a lot of positive mental health that just got me through some really, really dark times over the last few years. So I think that's the main thing I wanted to just kind of touch on, is just that journey, and specific. I mean, gaming in general, but Star Trek Adventures in specific, partly because of Star Trek being so positive, so hopeful. It gave me something to look forward to, thinking we're going to get through this dark period and there's going to be something better on the other end. Don't know what that looks like yet, but at least I'm on this particular journey with these people who have this interest of mine, and we can kind of get through it together. So Michael, I'll pause there.
Yeah,
if you want to add anything.
I want to ask Connor, do you find a commonality in what Jim was talking about? What from your experience and your cross between being a therapist and gaming, is that a common thing that he's talking about? And what's your experience with that?
Well, before I address that, I just want to say it takes an awful lot of courage to admit that. So thank you for for being open and for even just opening and saying, this is a safe space where people could discuss these sorts of things. I don't think that what Jim is talking about is that unusual. In discussions I've had with people during the pandemic and now in this sort of like rediscovering who we are following it, because I don't think we're quite there yet. Even like discovering who we are as a people in a society following. A lot of the norms have been shaken up. A lot of our expectations of the way things have always been have sort of been cast by the wayside. And so there's a certain amount of uncertainty, which breeds anxiety and stress. But that positive message there of Star Trek is honestly one of the things that kept me buoyed as well. Understanding that, yes, things do occasionally change. They do get shaken up. But knowing that you have that hopeful message, and knowing that I could look forward to it. I looked forward to New Trek through all of that because it kept me focused on a better future. The health benefits of RPGs, people are, researchers are looking into that still, right? We're still trying to get more evidence of not only of how they bolster mental health, but also ways that they can be used to help with that. But there's ample research into games, wider games in general, and the benefits on mental health, and the benefits are there. They really can provide a lot of supports, and there's things that in games that can help with that. Games at their very heart, besides being recreational, are educational. We learn a lot about ourselves and we learn a lot about each other through the act of playing. Our people are hardwired to do that from a young age, and you can see it in children. They play, but through play they learn about the world, and it's no different as we get older. We're on this planet. We're one of the few species that continue to play into adulthood.
Right.
So
we never
lose that sense that we can enjoy ourselves and still learn at the same time. As far as like mental health, though, when we're talking about like, okay, this really lifts me up. One thing that you kept coming back to and you kept mentioning over and over, Jim, was community. I found a community of people that also found peace, comfort, hope in this, and I was able to share this with them. And when we talk about gaming and the mental health benefits of gaming, obviously some keeping your mind busy has been shown through games like Sudoku, crosswords, or any sort of intellectual engagement. Even taking walks has been shown to insulate a person against dementia and Alzheimer's. But the community building insulates people against anxiety, depression, and other serious mental health disorders. It's when I talk to people about games, and I always say the therapeutic part of games is the community. It's the support that you get, the shared experience, because through playing the game, the game is important, absolutely. But we play the game because it gives us an opportunity to interact with others. It gives us that chance to connect. And when you look at like what are the factors that really protect somebody from mental health concerns or help insulate them, over and over again, the highest, like the one that rates at the top of the list, is community and relationships. And so it's nice to hear you mention that, Jim, because if there's anything I could get across to a listener, the thing about RPGs, games that really are going to give you help promote your health overall, it's going to be those relationships you form with other people around the table.
Yeah, I think, just a personal anecdote for me, my gaming group had transitioned. So between like 2013 and 2016, I wasn't gaming at all. And I was actually in a very dark place mentally too. It was just different things were happening in life. And in 2017, when Star Trek Adventures kind of launched, with the campaign, I got back into it. And immediately within 3 months, I was like, wow, I need this. Because I didn't know, when you don't know what you're doing, you're kind of doing things not deliberately. And then you get back into it, you're like, wow, I actually kind of need this. And it's so important. It brought light back into that creativity. And I needed, again, people telling storytelling with me and such like that. So now I know I have to make it part of my life just because it's therapeutic for me to do that. So then that's kind of my question. I know I want to talk about the difference between therapy and therapeutic. That's one of the questions we had for you. But I think I want to kind of start in chronological order here, because you're talking about that sense of community. And how does a gaming group create a safe space for this? We know some gaming groups, maybe they don't view gaming like that. We've heard some horror stories about things that happen in gaming groups. And of course, we want to encourage people, don't have these horror stories. So give us some advice. What's the first step to create a group that is a safe space and mentally healthy? What are some things that a group getting together should cover in a session 0, maybe,
Well, thank you for asking that question. I've been a long proponent of session 0s. And I know that there are people all over the internet with a number of varying opinions about this. Session 0, I've never had to have one with my gaming group, or session 0s, they're a requirement for any game that I'm getting ready to hop in. So a session 0 at its heart, let's talk about the purpose of a session 0. The point behind a session 0 is to promote the fun of all the players at the table, period. It's all about promoting fun. So how do you promote fun? Well, part of promoting fun is saying, these are the kinds of stories that we'd like to tell. These are the sort of characters we'd like to play. That's one way to promote fun. Another way to promote fun is just to make sure that we're not doing something that's going to piss somebody off, stress somebody out in a way that's not fun. Because a little bit of stress in games, you need to have a little bit of tension, but not so much that it ruins the experience. A lot of folks that say, well, Connor, I don't run a session 0 at my table. Oftentimes what you see with individuals who say that is they've got a consistent gaming group that they've known for many years, decades, personally known them, live alongside each other, families get together, kids get together and play. And in situations like that, it's probably not as important to run let's talk about lines and veils. Let's talk about using the X card, because I've known you for 12 years, 15 years. We've seen an awful lot. I know what's going on in your life. And because I don't want to be a jerk, the Wheaton rule, because I don't want to be a jerk, then I'm not going to include stuff in my game that I know is going to ruin your night. If my buddy Chuck is going through a really difficult divorce, I'm not going to throw marital discord in a game I'm running, because I don't want to be a jerk to my buddy Chuck, who I've known for 15 years and know that he's going through an awful lot. Hey, let's just like get into a battle of honor with Klingons and call it good. But when you have a gaming group where you don't maybe know each other, and especially like a lot of the gaming groups in the pandemic that were brought together because of the pandemic, these are folks that you maybe have just met. You haven't known them very long. You don't have the luxury of 15 years of experience getting to know Chuck. And so you're not going to know, meeting Chuck, Chuck has a lot going on at home in regards to his marriage. And so we're just going to stay away from that. You need to create a space where Chuck can say, hey, I'm here to have fun just like the rest of you. Please, let's just not go into this because it hits too close to home right now. And that's okay. And if you don't want to be a jerk, then you just sort of honor that. A session 0 gives you a chance to have those conversations and to bring them up so that you can make sure that everybody's having fun. Because in the end, Chuck deserves to have fun too. He doesn't deserve to have his night ruined and maybe have a crummy couple days when he should have been getting together with y'all and having fun. You know, you owe each other that. That's kind of what a session zero does. It promotes that sense of fun. So what would I do? I would talk about themes in an adventure. I talk about the sorts of characters you want to play. I would ask people what are some things that you're cool with having in the game, but you just don't want to role play through it, or some things you don't want to touch in the game at all. I would say, okay, well, what if we forgot something or something wasn't mentioned? Hey, how can you let us know? You know, like something that the X card would do. And it works.
Yeah. And I want to add to that and let Jim also add to it. Like some people, and I've been told this by my players, some people don't want to deal with social media in a game, meaning they don't want to deal with the negative, argumentative. They don't want to deal with that level of stress where people are pitting ideologies against each other. They don't want to deal with that either. So they want that breath of relief and escapism, to your point. So the only way you know that is by session zero, and letting people, if they say, I don't want to do that or this, don't embarrass them, don't shame them. Be like, okay, this, as you said, game is for everybody to have fun. So I really love that you said that, because, and I found that it's not only important to have a session zero, but a 1.5 and a 2. And when you know people maybe are having life experiences, to check in with them and say, hey, do we need to adapt this for you? How you doing? And building up that trust. So I love that you hit all those points.
Yeah, my first rule of session zero, and any players in my campaigns will tell you this. First rule of session zero is never over. So like we can always go back and revisit this at some point in the future if things change, if we forgot something, if something comes up in a game. Like, you know, let's have that communication. I am a moderator on one of the largest 5e forums on Facebook. We've got over 200,000 members. Most of the problems that people have with their gaming groups can be solved if people just communicated, right? And so if you've got this powerful tool where you can communicate with each other and keep that communication going, and it keeps your game going, so it doesn't like suddenly spontaneously explode in front of you and the game's done and then nobody's having fun anymore. Like, why wouldn't you use it? It's kind of stupid not to, honestly, if you value the game and you value your friendships that you make around the table. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I think I remember in the dark ages before the internet, my group and we were gaming, and we would try to make an effort to check in with each other either before the next session or like immediately after the session we just played, if we had time, right? We would get a snack break or something, and then we'd spend, you know, even if it was getting late, we'd be like, let's take 15-20 minutes and just chat. Like, did the game work out for you? Did we go places that you didn't want to go? Are there things that you want to see focused on next time? And then we'll touch on it then. That was before the internet. That was before we had easy tools that we have now. But now, of course, we've been able to make use of game forums. We've been able to make use of Discord. We've been able to make use of email and chat and stuff, and Facebook chat and stuff. And that helps a lot, because even if we're not at the game table together, we're still talking about the game. We're still thinking about the game. We may be thinking about our characters or interactions or whatever, but it's a good chance for me as the game master to really just touch base either with individuals or with the group as a whole and say, hey, you know, it kind of looked like you were having an off night the other night and you were getting triggered by a couple of different things. And did I do something wrong? Can I do something different next time? You know, or was everything okay? Like, you know, just tell me what's your feedback there. And that really helped to have that regular conversation with everybody, because it helped me as a game master keep my kind of finger on the pulse of where things were going and what the players were doing. And I really appreciated it when the players took the initiative to do that themselves, right? They'd reach out to the other players, or they'd reach out to me and said, hey, you know, that was a good session. Here's what I liked. Here's what I think could be improved, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely. Take advantage of the communication devices that you have at your disposal, especially now that we're in the modern era, right? And there's just so much technology that you can take advantage of. You know, there's no reason not to keep touch with your group, even if, you know, like you were saying earlier, Connor, you know, you've got a group that's 15, 20 years old, deep, you know each other back and forward, you know everybody's tendencies. It's still worth it to check in, right? I mean, don't just assume that everything's copacetic just because you've known the guy for 30 years or 20 years or whatever. Everybody's got their own thing going on, and even if you know somebody well, you may not know exactly where they are. So don't be afraid to reach out.
I want you to expand on something, Connor. You said session 0 never ends. And I like that in conjunction with what Jim's saying, is because I know for the people I've played with, I was very careful in my selection process of who came in to an online game via Discord, because I don't know these people. I knew they were writers for Star Trek Adventures, many of them, and I invited them because I expected a certain level of maturity, for them to be a Trek writer. And so I felt safe, because normally I never play online with anyone I don't know. That's my rule. So because you just don't know, what's going on in their life. And it's been nice to see with selecting the right mature group of people to play with is, one, we have a side forum just talking about what's going on in our personal lives. Like, hey, this is going on, this is going on. And I think that's important, because that gives you insight. Like, oh, if all of a sudden a hurricane is hitting your part of the town or your part of the country, gaming is not the most important thing for us to be doing right now. We may need to stop, make sure you're safe. Is your family okay? And I thought that's my kind of piece of advice with the session 0 never ending is what's your advice about how we keep track of that? Because there's some days where you really shouldn't be playing the game and you should just be taking care of the person.
Well, I can speak to how I do it in my games. Anybody that's listening, just note your mileage may vary with these tools, but this is how I handle it at my tables. The first thing I do is there is never a penalty for somebody having to miss a session, ever. So if somebody has to miss a session, in my campaigns, those that are comfortable will tell me the sorts of things going on in their life. And I hear them out. I tell everybody I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist, but I am a therapist. Like, I'm more than happy to listen, but I'm also a friend. And if somebody says something, like when they miss a game, they're missing a game because they got stuff going on, because they want the outlet too. They want to be able to hang out with people that they know. They want to have a good time, and they want to blow off some steam. So if they're going to miss a game, it's for a good reason. And I will never, ever penalize a player for not coming. People are like, well, what do you do with the story? If I can pretend, and the rest of us can pretend, that elves and dragons and magic are real, then we can pretend that a character somehow is off screen for an entire episode. This is no different than, watching Star Trek. And we do this all the time. This is a Star Trek podcast. Not every character is in every episode of Star Trek. Sometimes they're just not there. And somehow we're able to suspend disbelief long enough to have a complete episode that way. The other thing that I do, and this is something that came with maturity. If you had caught teenage 20-year-old Connor, as opposed to gray beard, been around the block a few times and have the wrinkles to show for it, Connor, I would have freaked out. But honestly, the thing I do that promotes that the most is at the beginning of the game and after a break, because I always do a break. I allow people to talk about whatever they want to talk about. People do talk about their personal lives. People do talk about the things they got going on, the things that they're worried about, the things they're hopeful about. That they get online and they celebrate their the awesome stuff that they've got going on, and they mourn their losses together. And that needs to be there. That table talk needs to be there. And like I said earlier, I was like, but we're here to play a game. Well, yeah, like we're still playing the game, but we need to make sure that everybody's getting out of it what they need. And it's not just the game. They're there because they want to hang out with you. They want that relationship. And part of that just means sometimes you just got to talk about this stuff that's weighing on you, because you trust the people at the table. You can lay it down for a little bit. And so 15, 20 minutes at the beginning of our session, just people talking about the movie they saw or what's going on in their life. And after the break, if they needed a little bit more time to talk about it, they'll talk about it for another 5 or 10 minutes before we get back to playing. And that in that space, in that doing, that's what I think shifted the sorts of games that I run, from a cool story with some neat plot hooks and cool encounters to something where people just feel valued at the table. They're still going to get the cool story. I really hope I delivered on those plot hooks, but I want them to feel good when they leave a table that I shared with them. I want them to feel valued, important, heard, and so giving that space that you were talking about, Michael, that does that.
Yeah, I'm curious, and Jim, I don't know if you have the question, but I will want to come back to how you design the game around that to make sure they feel valued. I think that would be very helpful to new game masters and people who really want to keep people coming back for more. So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, or Jim, do you have another question you wanted to?
I don't think I have a question. I was just going to share an anecdote that, everything that you're saying, Connor, I've experienced it. Like, oh yeah, we did that. Oh yeah, we did that. Oh my gosh, I'm glad to hear that we're not the only group that's experienced this. Like, during the pandemic, I was running a game on Roll20, and we were using Discord as the audio channel, and we didn't bother with video. So it was literally we were doing Star Trek audio dramas, like week in, week out, every session, because all we could hear each other, and we were using Roll20 for just the maps and the dice rolling and stuff. And it was super fun, right? Because we were really well connected, and it was a great community of people that we were working together. And I remember like, as we were getting into it, we were doing like 15, 20, we were up to like 20 sessions or something. And there was one night where, everybody got there a little late for some reason. It was just like one of those off kind of weird days. And we were just, shooting the breeze before the session, like we always do. And it got deeper and deeper, and we kept talking, and we were just like connecting as a group and a community. And all of a sudden, it was like an hour and a half into it, and somebody said, "Oh, were we gonna, not like, hey, I'm here to play, let's play." It was more like, "Oh, we were gonna play tonight. Should we cut it? Should we just hang out? Like, what do we want to do?" And we all kind of decided, we're having a good time just connecting and being together. Even though we're virtual, but and just let's just chill out and talk and have fun and not worry about the game, because the game is there. The game will be there. We'll come back to it. We're not done with it. We're just taking the night off, basically. And it was so positive to have that moment of like, oh yeah, we're not here just to game. We're here because we like each other and we're having a good time. So I appreciate everything you just said, because it just made me reflect on what a positive experience that sometimes I lose sight of because I'm so caught up in everything else in the world. It's like, oh yeah, I had that really great experience a few years ago, and I miss it. But it can happen again. So I wanted to share that anecdote. And then Michael, I wanted to reflect on something you said, and I think it's got something to do with this whole maturity thread that we're talking about, where we're really drawn to bringing in players. I guess for me personally, specifically for Star Trek, that are at a certain maturity level. And I don't think that's a bad thing to want that in your group. Like, I think what you were saying earlier, Connor, where you want to build a community of like-minded people so that you're not getting the random lone wolf in your game and all of a sudden it's throwing chaos into things, and that's not what you're looking for. I remember way back in the 90s when I was I was in college and I was trying to get a new group started. Again, this is before the internet. I actually my co-GM and we wrote up a little piece of paper that said, hey, we want to run a new Star Trek game based in the Next Generation era, because I think Next Generation had just come out. It was like in season 2 or something. We're like
1990 there.
Yeah. We're loving Next Generation. We want to do a Star Trek Next Generation RPG using a homebrew, because we didn't like the fastest system at the time, and there was nothing else out there. I don't think Last Unicorn Games was even out yet. And we said we're looking for players who are 18 or older, certain maturity level, this, that, and the other thing. Here's the phone number. And I remember my co-GM and we were really, really intentional about either meeting prospective players at like, we probably met him at McDonald's or a restaurant or something, or we'd call him on the phone and we would just talk to them for like half an hour, 45 minutes, basically an interview. Like, we want to play a game. We want some good players, but we're going to interview you. And gosh, I mean, looking back, it feels kind of pretentious to do this, right? To be like, oh, I'm running this game, but I'm going to interview you before you can play. I'm not just going to invite you over and play, right? But we were trying to sound people out because we'd gotten burned before on like random players who were just like going all over the place. And it's like, that's just not what we wanted for our game. And so we were much more deliberate. I mean, I remember we posted the little advertisement at a local comic book store, because this was even before game stores were a thing, right? Unless you were playing Warhammer. And it was just a really interesting, like, social experiment for us to, like, we were really nervous. Like, we're going to put this ad up. Are we even going to get anybody to respond to it? We didn't know, because, like, this is, I mean, random people posting their phone number. Like, what kind of, what are you gonna dredge up out of the woodwork, right?
It's so important though, because honestly, I my nieces or nephews are, growing up in the internet age, social media age, and we are all about vetting their friends. It's like, who are you talking to? And the whole family's engaged on this. Like, you don't talk to people you don't know, because you don't know what the intention is. So it's sad that we live in that day and age. Right. But likewise, we don't know if you're, inviting just anybody to join your game, their intention. You just don't know. You can assume the best, but I think a screening process of some sort is just due, because you want to have fun and you don't want someone to come in and start being negative or attacking other players or saying stuff off cuff who, disingenuous in the session 0 or something like that. There's a lot to that. I don't think people should be embarrassed about that. I know we want to be trusting, but we do have to admit that now we're meeting a lot of people on the internet nowadays. And one of the biggest things that makes Star Trek Adventures wonderful, we hear it all the time, is people come into the Star Trek Adventure forums and they say, wow, this is such a non-toxic environment. And then when it starts getting that way, the whole community, at least from my experience, are like, okay, that's enough. We're good. And that safe space, I don't do social media unless it's for Star Trek or my day job. That's the only, I don't have any of my personal stuff on there, because I don't want any toxicity. I don't scroll through it unless it's Star Trek and my day job. And I've done that just because I want to be a happy person. And I just, I need that for myself.
Very, very wise, Michael.
Right. And so, again, Connor, maybe talk about that. Is it a screening protocol? Is that just social media, or is it also just people need to start doing stuff like that?
I'm always going to advocate on the side of people need to feel safe in the situations that they're in. It's really hard to have fun with the game if you don't feel safe. And so every single person is going to have a different tolerance level for that. And they're going to have a different level of need for that. And just knowing who you are and what you need is going to be that vital starting point, right? And so as far as the work that I do, I put a lot of things out there so that people feel like they can trust me. At the very least, going in and understanding they could trust the person who's controlling the button that can, like, instantly boot somebody from the game, right? And even if you don't necessarily know each other, I mean, we're going to work on that. But if you know who I am and trust me, then that goes a long way. I try to maintain something of a public persona, and the image of myself I put out there is pretty genuine. There's still a lot of stuff that's pretty personal that I keep with me and my closest in-persons and my family, but trying to foster that sense of trust in me and vice versa. A lot of times when I meet new players in my campaigns, I meet them at the session 0. I can say that in my experience, if you start with that in-depth conversation and you set those ground rules and expectations early, like from the very beginning, before you even start to play the game, it does tend to work a lot of that out. The experiences I had when I was much younger before I did this, there were a lot more problem quote unquote problem players. And I don't like to call people problems, because people aren't problems. They just had different needs and a different personality, and it just might not mesh with everybody, and that's cool. That's fine. There's a gaming group out there for everybody. But since starting that sort of session 0, I can count on one hand the number of players I've had to ask to leave a campaign. And I'm a pretty prolific game master on Start Playing. I currently run 8 professional campaigns, and I've run hundreds of games just on that platform, and I can count the number of players I've had to ask to leave on one hand. And I think a lot of that's just being willing to talk about it early and often, because you know it really does frame that in a way that prevents a lot of the issues that you're talking about. That said, yes, some of them have been pretty ugly, but some of those interactions have been pretty ugly, but a lot less than I was used to before. Winning.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the fact that, I mean, if you could, is it like thinking about your track record in terms of like having so few people that you've had to ask to leave? Like, do you think is communication the number one piece of it that you can pin on, or is there some other component you think that leads to that level of success?
I think sincerely, I believe it's communication. Mm-hmm. I believe it's being willing to talk with each other. I think it facilitates like relationships where you don't want to hurt the other people. But I think it also sets up a foundation where if you do have a problem come up in the game, it doesn't metastasize into something much bigger. You're able to just have a conversation about it early, work it out, keep going. So I'm a big fan of that communication piece. And if it's something that you can't communicate through, mm-hmm. you know, then usually people realize, oh, this is something we can't communicate through, and they might decide to leave on their own without having to be asked.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So on that note, I was curious to get your thoughts on this piece of it. I know that, and of course, in history, in years past, I've seen stories like, I'm sure we've all seen stories like this pop up in gaming circles, and even now, I think it still happens from time to time, where a gamer will find themselves in a game that is toxic. Right, there is a bad faith player in there, or there's just something wrong with that group. And I mean, wrong, where maybe someone's getting unwanted advances put on them, or someone's being mentally abusive or something, and yet they're afraid to leave the game because of the game. Right, they love the community, or they love most of the other players. They love the game. They love to have the opportunity to get away from their life for a little while and get into the game and have some fun. But even then, they're getting away from their life and into the game, and it's still this toxic environment. I wanted, I don't know, I mean, there's any number of people who could be listening to this. You know, it's absolutely 100% okay to walk away from something like that. You know, there are tons of other games out there, but you just, focus on your good mental health. Like, you do not owe it to anybody to have to sit through any of that. Right. And if you're unable to communicate with the game master or the other players, or they're unwilling to communicate, don't hesitate to take the move and take care of yourself. I wondered if you have anything, if you agree, disagree, or if you have other advice for players out there, or even game masters who discover that they're kind of like stuck in this vortex of, I'm playing this game or I'm running this game and it's toxic, but I can't get that communication with the group. I can't end it. What are strategies to navigate that or to break through it?
Well, if you start with the idea that session 0 never ends, mm-hmm. it makes having that conversation again in the future easier, because you've explicitly said we can have a conversation about any of this stuff at any point down the road. And there's something intuitive and powerful about having those conversations early, and setting those sorts of expectations early, because once you say it out loud, magically it just falls into place and becomes a thing. I I always, that's where I start. I recommend anybody else, if you're starting in a campaign, that if you're running the campaign, insist on a session 0 before you start, where you have those conversations. If you're a player, insist on a session 0 before you start too, especially if you don't know the other players. And if you hear, well, we don't do that, that's usually a really big red flag, especially with people that you don't know. They do not put your fun as a priority. And there might be, some basic lacking of compassion there.
Yeah.
So, hey, you know what? That might be a good sign. Oh, you know what? Well, I decided I don't want to join, but, good luck with your game. You don't have to tell them why. You can just go on to find another game. And the good news about the internet, there's a ton of games you can join. And you can find a game that's curated pretty well for you if you're willing to look out there for it.
I want to touch on one other thing because, something real that's happening a lot is, we're fortunate, I think, right now, at least where we are in time, where more focus is being put on mental health as a take care of yourself. I mean, this generation is probably going to be one of the most fortunate generations over the last century where it's not embarrassing anymore to get the help. I know I have in my, life, and now with my niece, I'm like, it's the best thing that I ever did. It helped me figure out my triggers. It helped me, it's not solving my problems. I'm still solving my problems, but I'm sure getting to know myself, better. And so there have been times I know in again, my gaming group where maybe I notice something's a little off, but I'm not a doctor. I'm never going to be the kind of person to say, you should get mental health. But what are good tools that people can do, methodologies that if we do know something off, we know we want to put the person first, heal them so that they can get back to having fun with us, What are some steps you would advise that take if we notice something without being accusatory or, making assumptions? What are some good practices?
If you see somebody at your table that's struggling, I highly recommend not doing an intervention. It's great television. It's really crappy way to treat people who are going through a difficult time. If you are discussing with other players of the game, they're like, hey, Chuck looks like he seems a little bit off lately. Some might just say, I'm close enough to Chuck. I'll go have a one-on-one with Chuck at some point, private. We'll hang out, we'll grab a coffee and we'll talk or something. And sort of approaching it that way. If you've got that bandwidth, I highly recommend as many people as possible, both clinicians and especially lay people, look into something that's called mental health first aid. A quick Google search will tell you about this. What it is it's a one-day training. And what they do is they just talk to you about signs of mental health struggles in an individual or a person and the things that you can do to support them and help them get whatever help it is that they need, up to and including basic, not suicide prevention or treatment, but suicide intervention. Hey, you're going through a lot. I'm here with you the entire time. Let's get on the phone and call somebody who can help. And they do a really good job at teaching you that. Community agencies offer it. It's often free or incredibly low cost. You could save a life the same as if you become certified in CPR.
Why I love you saying that? I want to interject here is because being too reactive can actually be bone breaking in a situation like that too, where the person feels isolated because it's like, but there was something you said where you go, check with somebody else, like, hey, have you noticed something? I want to be clear that when you're asking that question, it's not to rally people to your cause. It's to sincerely just gather some data and figure out best approach. Some of the ones you just described, mental health, first aid. But want to be clear that some people get very attached to their characters, to the games, to the group as their outlet. So just because someone misbehaves once is not a reason to kick somebody out of a group, which could have actually worse effect, correct?
It can, absolutely. Everybody has an off night. Everybody's entitled to that. We all have our days where we're off. And sometimes we realize it early and we're like, hey, I won't be able to play tonight. I've got some things I got to take care of. And then, you take care of yourself that night. Sometimes you don't realize it until you're sitting at that table, and that's okay. It's perfectly okay. A supportive group of friends will be there for you, and they'll understand it might just be one night. If you see a pattern where you're really worried about somebody, then maybe it's time to have a discussion then. Without confrontation, without everybody teaming up or anything like that. Just a, hey, is everything all right? Like, I noticed that you seem a little irritable or you seem a little distracted. I'm
going to add on, just at the end, so people know for this episode, some of the things you suggested, some of the links or something like that. I'll make sure to email you, Connor, so you can give me a little list of some of those resources that people could reach out to, so that we can add a slide on that toward the end of this video cast here, just because I like people to have resources to go, because it's such a deep subject. We can't expect them to comprehensively know the right thing to do after watching our podcast about Star Trek Adventures. But they may want to, proceed, go a little further after. We want to encourage people. It's definitely now in this day and age with all the stresses and anxieties in life, worth knowing how to do, mental health first aid. Lots of companies teach it now, intervention, but if people are interested in the subject, we'll provide them some links for that.
Thank you.
All right. I know Jim had another follow-up too, since we're talking Star Trek Adventures.
I had one last question for you, Connor, and I'm really curious because of your wealth of experience as a game master, as a professional game master, and a game master. You said you're running 8 different games right now, probably a variety of genres. I'm sure it's not all Star Trek.
No.
In my experience over umpteen million years of running games, and most of them being Star Trek, but also playing D&D and just other RPGs and stuff, with different groups, I have discovered consistently. Now, I don't know if it's me as a game master or if it's just the gaming zeitgeist that I've been with these different groups. I have found that a Star Trek game, whether it's Star Trek Adventures or just other Star Trek games, has a very different vibe at the table, and the players vibe into it differently than they do compared to like a D&D game or a Pathfinder game or Star Frontiers or just literally anything else. My groups and I have been able to tell much more mature and thoughtful stories with Star Trek than we have been able to do with any other game. And I mean, we've had some great D&D sessions. We've had some great, other game system sessions, but they never quite hit the same way as Star Trek. And I'm wondering, I've never been able to figure out why, really, other than the fact that we all love Star Trek, and it's that literally any genre can fit into it, and you can tell thoughtful, meaningful stories. You could have whole sessions where you're never even rolling the dice, right? I mean, you can just literally be doing role play character stuff back and forth all night long. And I've never been able to do that with another group in another game, right? Like, cause like in my group, my groups I've played with, like when we do D&D, like we have these great role playing moments, and then as soon as an encounter comes up, right, the minis and the dice hit the table, and all of a sudden we're in like tactical combat mode, and that's just the way our brains switch, right? And then as soon as the combat's over, like all that goes away, and we're right back into the role playing phase of things. So I'm curious, like, have you experienced anything like this, playing all the different games, running all the different games that you've played? Like, does Star Trek as a IP entity individual of itself, not specifically Star Trek Adventures, like do you get that sense that things are different among these different games, or have you been able to do like really cool Star Trek-y stuff like that in other game systems?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of times when folks sign up to play a certain kind of game, like, I really want to hop in on this game, they're going to automatically think to their understanding of the property. Like, I know when I watch Star Trek, there's a pretty good chance there's going to be some sort of tension and interpersonal conflict. There's probably going to be something with individuals' personal lives. Very likely there's not going to be combat. And going into a Star Trek game, That's one of those things that you just sort of accept. They're going to have a problem. There's going to be tension that they're going to have to diffuse it. They're going to have to solve the problem, but that problem might not ever involve them picking up a phaser or a disruptor or a batleth. They might just have to talk it out or science it out or cooperate it out and solve it together. And so I think people hopping into a Star Trek game go in with that because of their understanding. I can say with 100% certainty that other games can deliver that as well. It's just people have to have a good understanding of what that's going to look like going in. There is one of my campaigns that I run every other Thursday. A large portion of the players in it are mental health professionals. I don't know why. It's just the way it worked out. They will get together and for an entire session not roll a dice, and it's Dungeons and Dragons. And they will not roll a dice because they're so interested in telling meaningful stories about their characters, about their interactions with each other, about how they interact with the environment and the story. They get as much pleasure out of sitting around a campfire and their characters telling stories and supporting each other, and being there for each other, as they more than they would even from a fight. And usually a lot of times when the fight comes, they're usually just itching to get the fight over.
I love that.
So they can get back to loving on each other, supporting each other, dealing with adversity together. And so you can find that. It depends on less about the game, although the game is important because it does frame everything, and more about what people are bringing with them to the table and what they're looking to get out of the experience. So to answer that question, you can find it in other games. It's more about the spice that the players add.
Yeah.
Than the pot that you cook it in that the game provides.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. It's so encouraging to hear that because I think it's just the groups I've been with and the experiences that I've had. I've just never been able to find quite that kind of group that would do like D&D, but like the dice and the stuff isn't as important as just telling the story. So that it's heartening. So at some point, someday I'll find a group that does that.
Beautifully enough. And this is like when you're like, okay, how has the Mercer effect affected your game? The Mercer effect has affected my games because players don't come into it automatically thinking in terms of combat statistics only. They actually want to get to know these characters as individuals and see how they interact with each other and how they view their world, and find the magic in those moments as well. Critical Role, thank you for doing that for us, so that we can expand the number of stories. I can remember this group. I'm not even going to lie. The moment where I felt like, holy crap, I made it as a storyteller was when I had one of the players' characters marry an NPC before they walked into Castle Ravenloft. Just like a I'm going off to war sort of moment, and an entire episode where there was a wedding in D&D. I'm like, okay, yes. At this point, I feel like I've officially made it as a dungeon master. Let's keep going, and we've told lots of great stories since then. But
oh, that's awesome. So speaking of which, I promised you this at the top of the show, or I mean, even before we started recording. I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about your campaign. You mentioned artifact reclamation, and I'm fascinated. So I was wondering if we could take a moment. Clearly all this mental health stuff super important, but thought maybe you could just share a little bit about your campaign.
Oh, okay. Well, I am very fortunate. I do run a Star Trek Adventures campaign. I'm a huge Star Trek Adventures fan, have been since the game came out. But I mean, I'm a Star Trek nerd. Always have been. The story I knew when I put together this campaign, I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just, look, we're Starfleet, or ooh, twist, now we're Klingons. I wanted to tell a type of story that might be a little bit different. And so what we've done is I've created a game where people are just Federation citizens. They are paid. They formed a company of experts, and they're paid for jobs where they simply reclaim, like rightfully reclaim, things that were taken from people. And there's a rich lore history in Star Trek surrounding this. They are currently finishing up season 1, and they are working for Jill Ora. And if you don't know who Jill Ora is the daughter that was portrayed in the episode 4 Lights. The daughter who's brought in by her Cardassian father and sees Picard there being tortured.
Whoa.
And the dad talks to her about how individuals like Picard had robbed their people of culture, and they don't really love their people the way that he does, the way that she does. And you get a hint of that even just from the Gull there, that he, just like Picard, has a sense of history, pride in his culture, a love of their own history. He talks about artifacts that were stolen, that were sold off, like sold at bargain basement prices to help fund the war effort against the Bajorans, against the Bajoran people. So the story that I have is set at the time of Picard. So it's a good 30, 40 years later. By this point, Jill Ora is a grown adult, and she is an archaeologist herself at a university on Cardassia. And she's made it her life mission to help bring as many of those pieces of history home to her people as possible. And so what it does is it sets up our heroes, our protagonists of the story, who are Federation citizens, are like, you know what? Like, we've got a lot of moral stuff going on there. We know the Cardassians did horrible things. Jill didn't do horrible things. The Cardassian people still deserve their history. And we know, we have the benefit of looking forward and seeing, in the year 3000, the Bajoran, the Cardassians are part of the Federation, right? They, the peoples were able to grow together past their adversity. And so the heroes of the story have reclaimed things that have a particular meaning to the people of Cardassia who are trying to rebuild themselves after the Dominion War. And so
you call it Star Trek Reclamation? Is that the name of it?
So it's on Start Playing, and the name of the campaign, and I write the episodes myself. It is called, as I pull it up.
Yeah, and then I'm going to ask if there's a place I could look at the
Artifact Hunters.
Is there a place we can look at the post-play reports?
Right there are like some reviews that were written by players who have been in the campaign. I tend to protect the games that I run as sacred spaces.
Nice.
Those experiences are meant for the people that are at the table, and so I do maintain that. But they might decide that they want to share some things in the reviews, and if people come and ask me questions, as long as I know I'm respecting the people who I'm telling the story with,
protect it. We had Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly on a couple of weeks ago. They're the writers of the Star Trek comic, IDW publishing Star Trek writers, and they admit that what they're writing now was based off their games 13 years ago, 14 years ago, that they're pulling in actual characters and plot lines. And I'm like, awesome. That's so deep. So what you have is sacred space, and I hope one day to see this in novel form or comic form or something like that. That'd be so cool.
Yeah. It's a really cool story to tell. It's a really cool story to tell. And what I put them at the Bozeman historical site at the time that the Borg virus took over the Federation ships in season 3 of Picard. Like, so they're in Bozeman when all of a sudden the young ensigns are like going all Borg and shooting people. Cool. Like, and so I'm narrating like, oh, you're at the, the futuristic version of TGI Fridays, just getting an awesome blossom. And, and I'm leaning into like, okay, mixing the Picard, mixing the lower decks, pulling these story elements, pulling in like elements like Petra from Lower Decks, but also Vash from the Next Generation.
That's awesome.
I love it. Dropping the story hooks and seasoning them throughout from all these years of these great stories that we've all shared together.
I love it. When you were talking about it, I just love the idea of this group going to reclaim the lost artifacts, like going to find the Kivas Fajos of the Collectors Guild and like having a conversation with them and saying, that interesting thing in your collection, that actually belongs to this species and planet Umpty Ump, and they kind of want it back.
They did that. They went to a collection from to reclaim a Cardassian fertility idol, and microscopic print along the surface was an entire lineage of a village. And so it was like genealogical information. It wasn't just an object of artistic beauty. There's genealogical information. And Jill Orr's like, I'd really like this back because this could help tell the story of this region, in a poignant way. So is there any way that you can? And so, yeah, they try to cause a distraction by playing up, Ferengi greed and an Andorian artifact hunter put herself in like this mobile iron lung thing and said that she was a Bajoran war veteran.
Now my dream is for them to run into the think tank for Voyager, who are the ultimate collectors. I want to see that as their arch enemies. I love this story you read.
Oh my gosh, there's so much here. I could spend a whole nother episode just riffing off all this stuff, Michael and Connor. This is great. I was going to say something. What was it? This is a little bit of a non sequitur, but it's related to something that Connor mentioned, and I wanted to just take that little nugget out and expand on it just for the fans who are listening. I know we're getting closer to wrapping up here, but Connor mentioned that it's really important that you make the games a sacred space, and that what happens in the game is for that group of people, and you're not going out of your way to sharing the stories with the outside world. You're not making the effort to record it. You're not making the effort to put in all the tchotchkes and all the sound effects and all the uniforms and all that stuff. And so I want our listeners to remember, if you're just getting into the game, don't feel overwhelmed by thinking that you need to have the high production values of certain groups out there. You don't have to share the stories with anybody. Michael will love to put your stuff on Continuing Mission because we just love to share. If you're doing Captain's Log, we love to share your stories because we're storytellers, right? You got to tell stories back and forth and share them, but don't feel like you have to do it. Keep it to your group, talk to your group at your session 0 or your continuing session 0. And if they're comfortable sharing with it, share it if you want to. But it's totally okay to make this a private little happy little box that you keep to yourself and you grow it together with your group, and you don't have to share it. And I know, especially in this day and age of social media, and like everything is out there on TikTok and YouTube and Twitch, and like everybody's sharing everything, and some people are oversharing. It's just too much. It's totally okay, especially in this day and age, to have something private for yourself and for your group, and just like enjoy it. And people can be like, oh, what's that all about? And you can tell them a little bit, but you don't have to share it. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, we've like been cutting our teeth now on actual plays on APs and people like running their games openly, and if everybody's on board with that, like, let's do that. Before this, our games were private. They were for us and our friends. And a part of that is a part of me working to create that safe space with the players is letting them know, hey, you can act the clown in here, like it's fine. It's not going to be disseminated on the internet. You don't need to worry about what you say, or if something comes out and it's not the most ideal way, or we have it's between us. It's our space. It's our story. It's between us, and for the players I run for, that works for them. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm loving the general theme. Myself and Jim talk a lot about how Star Trek Adventures is really STEAM in action. Playing STEAM, which is science, technology, electronic, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and that's so mentally healthy to fire off all those synapses. And so we really want to encourage people, have fun with the game. There's enough stress in the world. If you're able to create a safe space where people feel refreshed and walk away, with their imagination fired up a little bit more, or going to maybe a dismal job or maybe a hard family situation, and then being able to say at least the one thing, well, you know what? My escape is here, and when I do it, it's healthy, it feels good. I mean, what a great thing to be able to provide for people, right? And I know we talked about, that this was a survival mechanism for a lot of people, this little piece of hope, which to me is so wonderful, because that's what Star Trek is all about, is seeing humanity at its best, and we get to live it actually right here and create that. Let's do maybe, a final word from Jim about the subject, and a final word from Connor about the subject, and then we'll go into our gratitude session. And actually, I'm going to want to, when you get to Connor, we'll have Jim and then Connor. Connor, make sure to let us know where we can connect with you online too. Like, where can we find you on social media? But Jim, any final statement about mental health in gaming?
Mental health in gaming, yeah. I mean, I'm just going to go personally and just say it's been really important to have this outlet and the safe space to not just work in, but also just to live in for the last several years. I mean, the last 7-8 years or something, it's just been challenging with just a lot of different things going on in the world and personally and everything else. And to know that I had Star Trek Adventures to lean into, not just working on it, but just, connecting with the fans, connecting with writers and freelancers and stuff, has done wonders for my mental health. like I don't even know where I'd be right now if I didn't have this type of outlet. I mean, I'm sure I'd be doing some fiction writing or something, but it's just very different to have this community that we've developed around the game. And it's awesome to see it. And I hope that gamers out there, I hope you find a community, whether it's Star Trek or D&D, like whatever game you're playing. I'm sure a lot of games out there have communities like this. So I hope you find it. I hope you find you're happy and embrace it, and then build it, right? Like bring people along with you. Because if you're getting a benefit from it, maybe you can reach out and help somebody else get a benefit out of it as well.
Okay. Connor, final words and where we can find you.
Well, I thanks for tuning in. Just by sharing the space and listening, it helps send the message that this is an important topic to think about and discuss. And it creates a hobby that's more welcoming for everybody. As a side note, I always do try to hammer out that there's a difference between therapy and therapeutic. A therapy RPG is not the same as a therapeutic game. A therapeutic game is just one that supports your health, like the ones that we're talking about. Therapy is always delivered by a trained professional that's qualified and licensed. So they are out there. There are resources out there that you can touch on to get information. TakeThis.org can link you up with some of those if you're interested in therapy. Now, in addition, I throw out there, if you're hitting a rough spot and you just need somebody to talk to, there is a 24-hour hotline where you can sit, and there's always somebody on the other end of that phone who will answer it and who will listen to you. You can just, in the United States, dial 988 to be connected with the Suicide Prevention Hotline. Even if you are not immediately, if you're not thinking about self-harm, but you just need somebody to talk to, they'll listen. So as far as me again, my name is Connor Self. I am a therapist, a gaming creative, professional DM, and a charity lead. I'm the president of D8 Summit Charities. We're a 501c3 that educates people like I'm doing here right now with y'all, talking to you about an important issue. We do it at conventions as well. We run a large fundraiser convention every year in April that helps fund these efforts and also supports great causes. You can learn more about that at the letter D, number 8, summit.org. We are currently planning our 2024 show. It's going to be awesome. I'm kind of sad I won't be able to get at Al Spader again this year. I've been asking him like year after year because we go back a ways. But I can promise you there will be a non-zero amount of Star Trek adventures, but also some other really great games there as well.
And where's that located at?
It is located, it's April 19th to 21st in Dixon, Illinois. It's a short piece from O'Hare Airport. It's a very affordable thing. It's ran by a charity. 100% of the money that we raise at the event actually funds charity efforts. We've donated to homeless shelters, food banks, suicide prevention, youth activities, and education efferts. We go to different
all
conventions.
Those links so we can post it around this episode. We want to
absolutely
make sure to do that. Please,
I'll make sure you get all of it. Come on out. I'll give you a high five and a handshake, or a hug if you want it. So that's pretty cool. To find me, if you're interested in finding me, I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at the Healer DM. All one word, DM like Dungeon Master. You can also find me on the internet. You can go to my website with links to everything. That website is thehealerdm.card with 2 R's.com. It has contact information for me and links to a bunch of things I've written if you're interested in finding games that actually tell hopeful stories. And you can find me all over the place. I'm a guest of honor at Gary Con this next year for the 50th anniversary of that Dragons game. But one thing that I always tell people is if you take the time to stop with me, I'm going to take the time to stop with you. So if you see me, let's chat. I'm that sort of person.
Thank you for making yourself so accessible. So I'm going to start gratitude right there, and then we'll hit Connor and close out with Jim as normal with our gratitude. I'm going to thank you, Connor, because this is such an important subject for you to come on our show and take the time for this to help people is what you're doing. And in a larger world, I want to thank all the mental health professionals out there, especially the ones through the pandemic, even medical professionals who themselves needed mental health services after what they went through. So I'm a big proponent on get the help you need. There's different type of solutions people have. It could be a spiritual solution. It could be a pharmaceutical solution under the advisement of a doctor. Mental health is so important nowadays that people, just like they check their physical health and do exercise, you also need to check your mental health and do exercises to stay strong. So really appreciate, Connor, you bringing this to the show. Such a valuable guest. It's been too long, but we're still glad to have too long in getting this show done, but we're glad to have got it done. Finally, done. And hopefully you'll come back again in the future. All right, Connor, so you can do gratitude and then we'll pass over to Jim when you're done.
I want to echo what you said. A big amount of gratitude out there to the helpers. There are always people who aren't running away from a crisis; they're running toward it. Find out who those people are and support them. But I definitely want to give a big shout out to Michael and Jim. Part of the problem that we have around mental health is, first of all, we sort of break off mental health like it's separate from physical health, but really it's just health. And we attach a stigma to mental health that we would never dream of doing to physical health, and that people are ashamed and hide it like it's a moral failing when it's not. Just having those discussions makes it more likely that when people need help, they'll seek it. So my gratitude is to all the people who are willing to be vulnerable, that will say, hey, this is my experience. This is my walk. This is how it helped me. There's nothing wrong with you if you have to go out there and seek that. So that's my gratitude.
I sense a theme. So echoing both of you, I'm gonna thank you, Connor, and all the mental health professionals that are out there, from as far back as I can remember. Like I'm Gen X. I was brought up with my family like they did their best. We were never encouraged to talk about our problems, about our issues. We kept it very quiet, very Midwestern, very don't keep things on the level, keep things to yourself. And I discovered as I got older, that was a detriment to my mental health. And it wasn't until I really, really needed help that I reached out and I said, you know what, I'm in a situation I cannot get out of this on my own. So, very next day I reached out to a mental health professional and I said, I need some assistance here because I don't have the history or the knowledge or the experience to figure out how to navigate this. And this is what you're trained to do. So please help me. And so I am grateful for all the mental health professionals who've helped me and who have helped others. That led me to becoming a deacon at my church and to becoming a Stephen minister and becoming a wounded healer myself. So you get help and then you help others who need help. That's always been my philosophy. And so just grateful for everybody who's doing that hard work and running toward things when other people are running away. Connor, you hit it right on the head there. Be a helper if you can, or if you can't be a helper, then get out of the way of the helper so that they can go help somebody, right? And then finally, I'm grateful to all the fans who've been playing this game from the beginning, all the fans who love Star Trek and are just on this ride with us. Grateful for that community. The Star Trek family grows every day by leaps and inches and bounds. And I'm just grateful to be part of it, grateful to be enabling one little piece of it with this game. And I'm sure hope everybody's having fun with it. And, reach out, tell us about it. Tell us, we just love to hear your stories. And safe space. I've always got a safe space. So, I'm not as outgoing as Connor. I'm a little bit more introverted, but if you ever run into me at a convention or something, don't hesitate to come up, talk to me, sign my book. Because I always want the fans to sign my book. I mean, I'm happy to sign yours, but I'd rather you sign mine because that's satisfaction for me, is just knowing how many people have been touched and get to enjoy just being part of the Star Trek, the universe as it is. So thank you to everybody. And Connor, thank you for being on the show. This is so important, this topic, and I wish we could do more of these episodes. So I'd love to have you back sometime to go into more detail on other things or even more deeper into mental health or something. But thank you for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time with us tonight.
Yep. So as always, IDIC.
Be safe, be well, live long and prosper. We'll talk to you all next time.
Lead with love.